Okay, today we'll be discussing issues pertaining to training. And I think training, we all know that this is about passing of knowledge from one person to the other. So when someone is a trainer, it's assumed that he has some knowledge that he has to pass on to other people. So it always happens that when you are in an organization, there are people who are not knowledgeable in certain areas, or they might be knowledgeable, but they might be lacking some skills and knowledge in some areas. So trainings are organized for them so that they become knowledgeable in that specific area. And we all know that the training starts even when someone is just a child, whereby teachers will train students from a space whereby, for example, someone who was not able to write is being taught to learn how to write, or someone who was not able to read is being taught how to read. So we also learn through trainings the other languages or mathematics, other subjects. All that is so about for us to have some knowledge in those specific areas. So even within the workspace, there tend also to be some trainings. Trainings could happen, for example, when there is a new system that has been brought into the organization, or a new machine. It could be a new culture that has been brought into the organization, or could be people have developed a policy, for example. So we might need to train people on how they should be able to utilize that. So you can talk about maybe issues pertaining to pension. You can train people on pension. You can train people on transport management. You can train people on records management. You can train people in finance management. You can train people in different areas, how best you should be able to manage different processes when you are in the organization. So most organizations would have, for example, even a policy on how maybe they should be able to manage the training function. So the training itself is a process which could be either in short term or sometimes also in long term. And for short-term training could be a one-day training up to 2 weeks, sometimes even 3 weeks, or sometimes even a month. But these trainings, I think there are no certifications which are provided by, but maybe they just maybe trainings, I mean, certificates related to not trainings, I mean, not certificates which are awarded as qualifications per se. Yeah, but they might not be accredited. You might not use them for uh, other spaces. For example, for you to say you have got some kind of a qualification, and you claim that you have got a qualification that should because you attended a short training. But for long term, it's whereby maybe you might still have to sit for exams and all that. And when you have passed, you are certified to be someone who is knowledgeable in that field. So I'll give example, like you can have a short course in stores management, for example, so you get a certificate. And sometimes you can also do a long-term training, for example, in human resource management, and you get a diploma, a bachelor's degree, or a master's degree. So that's why I'm saying there are two different kinds of trainings. Could be the long-term training and also the short-term. And I think what we need to appreciate is that it all depends on what an organization wants in terms of how they want to be training their staff members. Yeah. So what we need to appreciate is training is always important. If you know that, for example, there are actors, players, football players, they do a lot of trainings before each and every game. So training is more or less like preparing so that you're able to perform in different aspects that you are doing. So if we, for example, actors and the singers, for example, they do practice a lot, and also they do a lot of rehearsals before an event, for example. So what more with employees? So it's always important to appreciate that there is always need for a matter of practicing or training so that you're able to understand, to grasp the content that you need to No. And what we need to appreciate is whenever you're making this kind of decisions, what do you need to ask yourself, for example, in your policy, when you have got a training policy, for example, you should be able to answer the questions. Can an employee, for example, who is on a specified contract, undergo a long-term training, for example, and also how relevant is the training to the applicant job? So maybe an employee has applied for a training, so how relevant is that training? Because at the end of the day, you can do a training, one, for the sake of improving his performance, current performance, but also sometimes trainings are done to prepare for senior positions. So you should be able to. So what I'm trying to argue is whatever you're doing, it should be done in the interest of the organization and not in the interest of the individual. And also at the same time, whenever you're organizing training, you should be able to look at to say, are funds available? Did we budget for this particular training, for example? So it's always important for you, whenever you want to manage trainings, to ensure that the funds for that kind of training are available. And also, I think whatever you are doing, is it the night of the future of the organization, and what kind of the knowledge gaps that kind of training is going to address. And also at the same time, we might need to be mindful of the fact to say, for example, can you send someone on a training, whether long-term or short-term, whilst the person is on probation? So your policy might be able to describe all that. So it's always important that you have a comprehensive training. And also, for example, if someone has been supported from one training, whether long-term or short-term, how soon, often can also be supported for another training, for example. So well, these are some of the things that we should be able to be considering. And also, maybe if an employee has supported himself in training, what's the policy of the organization? Can the organization refund such kind of an employee? So these are some of the things that we need to be mindful. So it's always important to have a policy and describe all that. And also, these are so in short, whatever you have done, you should be able to look at to say whether what you have indicated in your training policy is in line with the organization strategic plan, and also at the same time the terms and conditions of service of the organization. So, and also to say who will be responsible, for example, for facilitation of the training. Could be outside facilitator, or you are going to using an internal facilitator. So what is important also is to define the key roles of each and every person who will be involved in the training process or in the training cycle. So it's always important that you have a comprehensive policy on how you're going to manage the different training issues pertaining to the organization. So I think when you look at the training policy and when you look at the training process, for example, which starts with the identification of training needs, for example. So when you talk about the training needs, you start with you use tools. For example, you can use observations, you can use performance management, you can also using other things like I've talked about performance management. You can use the observations, and even sometimes you can the employee himself can be making references to you can be making references that is looking for training in a specific area, and these might be included in the budget, for example. So once we have identified the training need, what you need to think of is to say you identify the provider who is going to provide it. Is it going to be done internally, or maybe someone outside who has to facilitate the training? And also you need to review the course content, whether the course content will address the problem that you are looking for. So this one I'm referring to a short-term training, for example. So you might need to look at the content, and also after you have reviewed the content, you are now implement the training, where you can engage the consultant or maybe the training provider to provide the training. So in the course of the training, it's always important for the individual to attend the training. Yeah, and also after that, you might need to evaluate, or maybe you might get a report and all that, but you might need also to evaluate whether the person has improved in his performance after attending the training. So these are some of the things that we need to be able to appreciate. So you might need to evaluate and all that. And also there are certain key people within the organization who can be crucial or key when it comes to training. So I will look at like the controlling officer. Yeah, the controlling officer could be the MD, could be the CEO, or the executive director, and among other people. So who is in charge of the organization? So this kind of people, they have got a need to seek to approve. Yeah, so they might have to approve or to send the tone on how the trainings have to be conducted within the organization, but also has to adhere to the training policy that is in the organization. And these are some of the things that we need to appreciate, to say he has got a very key role to play within the organization. Yeah, so he has got a very key role when it comes to the training. And apart from the training, apart from the controlling officer, you might need also to have the training committee. Yeah, so this is one of the key things we need to talk about training. We're not talking about training without this kind of committee. You need to look at what is the role of the committee and the composition. We should have maybe representation from different departments, and also maybe from different levels, from top people and also people who are below. They might have representatives within that particular committee. So after having the committee, also you need to have a chair, secretary, and these people will be, their role mainly is to evaluating the training request in light of the training application. So they'll be after evaluation, they'll be looking at to say maybe what kind of trainings can we approve. So for example, they can have a criteria on how to use for example, could be looking at to say, is the employee confirmed? So when they have received the application, they'll be looking at, is the employee confirmed? If the policy says you cannot send someone who is not confirmed, then you should be able to look at that. But there are certainly organizations whereby once the person has joined, you might need to send that point of a person to a training. But also have prior or training opportunities may be provided to the individual. You might find that people are just jumping from one training to the other. So this also breaks the teamwork, the team spirit within the organization. So it's always important to also rotate the trainings to ensure that each and every person at least is also trying to attend the training. And also at the same time, a person, for example, not on long-term training. For example, you're considering for short-term training, then you're sending someone who is already on a long-term training and is learning. You might disturb that particular person and all that. It all depends on the needs of the organization, but also you need to look at the relevance of the training. So the committee will be able to look at the relevance of the training, and at the same time the duration of the training. Is it justifiable? For example, do we have funds for example, the cost of the training, the value for money? Was it the training budgeted, for example? So those are some of the things that you need to be able to manage whenever you're managing the training when you want to look at the needs of an organization. And also when you are looking for for example, the long term, other issues you might be considering it to say, is the training provider, for example, accredited? Is the training program accredited, for example? Yeah, but maybe as the employee not being supported for a long term, and also the employee, is he not nearing retirement? Sometimes you find that you have just someone is about 57 and you are sending that particular person for a PhD, and maybe your retirement is 60, and 57, 58, 59 is finishing his masters, and at 60 is retiring. So these are some more things which should also be to consider. And for long-term trainings, you might consider issues of assigning bonds. Yeah, you should be able to look at the bonds, whether you have bond of with the employee, so that maybe whenever you have trained someone, you can agree to say maybe after some years you're not supposed to leave the organization and all that. So this is some of the things which are also very, very important when you consider issues of training. And also there's a role of the training department, for example, to keep records. I think when I was discussing issues of records management and labor statistics this other day, I think we were looking at to say the HR department has to keep some records, for example, of the organization, how many employees have been trained, for example, which trainings were attended, for example. So all these, and also maybe they act as a secretary of the training committee, and also they are supposed to keep records and guide the committee members on how they process the trainings. And these are some of the key things that are also very, very important. The Human Resource Management Department also is responsible for sharing of knowledge. For example, you can attend, for argument's sake, in stores, or one person can attend stores audit training, for example, how to prepare for an audit in the stores, for example. So when that person has attended that training, everybody within the stores might not be able to attend. Maybe funds are not permitting. So he is supposed to disseminate that. So you can organize a session whereby you can invite the employees, the other employees. He should present what he learned and all that. Others can also learn from that, so that whenever you're training, you want to send the people for another training, you can send a different training and not the same training, because these people maybe you can send only stores receiving or how do we deal with damaged stock and all that. Yeah, so the biggest issue is to say there are funds which have been used for the organization, from the organization, and now everybody should be able to benefit from that training. So knowledge sharing is also very, very important. And also, yeah, so even the individual employee has also a role to play within the within the organization, because at the end of the day, if the employee doesn't play a role in training, then they say you cannot force a horse to drink. Yeah, but sometimes it's always important to look at the individual employee to say what is his role when it comes to training. So he should be able to initiate training, discuss with his supervisor in terms of the CPD areas and all that, and agree on the CPD areas depending on the performance assessments. But what happens in most cases, you find that no agreement with the supervisor, someone he has just seen an advert in the newspaper, then he's requesting for that training. Sometimes it doesn't work like that. You need to budget for it, and also maybe you need to discuss with the supervisor, and the individual employee should be willing to attend that training. And I'm not trying to say that the individual employee should force himself to attend a training that is not in the interest of the organization, but the supervisor will play a critical role to engage the employee why he should be able to attend that kind of training, but also is there also to disseminate the training. So these are some of the key things that we know we should be considering when it talks about training. And I think I mentioned about issues to do with how do you identify training needs. I think one of the things I mentioned about observations, performance assessment is also important after discussions. I think, as I am saying here, the individual employee can discuss with his supervisor and be able to agree on the training areas. And also at the same time, you can look at the grievance reports, for example, analysis of the workload, and also changes in the work system, for example, can trigger trainings, and also the accident reports. From accidents, you can be able to conclude to say there's need for a training. So these are some of the things that are very, very important when it comes to training, and why you should be able to send your employees to a training. I think we will not emphasize these things, and they are very, very important. The biggest thing is to say we want to improve performance of the organization. So there are also other things that you can do as part of training. It's not always that you should do training which is facilitated by outsiders. You can also do a training through within the organization by being training each other. Sometimes you can be able to buy books for some employees, induction, orientation. This is also a part of training. But especially in meetings, some meetings can be people can learn a lot of things from meetings, team buildings, role playing. You can ask someone to play a certain role. For example, in accounts, someone who has been in expenditure for a long time, you can ask him to go to revenue, for example. Yeah, so sometimes it's just for knowledge sake, and you can be able to improve his or on the job training, whereby you can assign specific tasks to an employee. Yeah, but also sometimes you can also use job shadowing. the coaching and mentoring cannot be emphasized. Cannot be over emphasized. So these are some of the things which are very, very important when you want to improve your training aspect within the organization. So at the end of the day, you train people so that they should improve their performance and they should be able to work better. So I think each and every training should be valued to an extent that is improving the performance of the individual and the department, consequently the organization, so that you're able to compete favorably with other competitors. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching this video.